Hey guys, Coach Chris here, back with another video. Got another training game in this week, and here's how it went. Playing the black pieces against a 1987. White opened with e4, responded with e5, and white played knight f3, developing a piece towards the center. And I do the same, defending the pawn. Knight c3, knight f6. So we're in a 4 knights game, and now we're in a Ruy Lopez 4 knights. And here I played knight d4, and my opponent responded with bishop a4. Not familiar with this move. What I'm familiar with is, say, knight takes e5, queen e7, and then after, say, knight f3 takes, queen takes e4, then we're back in business, and then something like this. And then important to remember is after c4, play a6 so you don't get forked. Anyway, so I was familiar with the complications that happen after knight d4 if white tries to take on e5. Bishop a4 actually makes quite a bit of sense. I can't play d6 to reinforce the e5 pawn because that pawn is pinned to the king, keeps pieces on board, keeps the tension. And here I wasn't really sure what to do about this attack on my e-pawn. So I ended up taking on f3. Engine says this is inaccurate, and it has to be, right? Because I've moved a knight once, twice, 3 times for a knight that's only moved once, and that allows him to recapture, developing his queen. But I didn't see what else. Engine says that the what else is c6, and if white takes, the very cold-blooded d6, and you just sacrifice the e-pawn. If white goes back, then pin, and the engine says black's just fine here, which is interesting. I didn't see this. Even now I'm not sure that I would be able to play this well. So knight f3, while inaccurate, not like a huge mistake or a blunder, keeps black in the game, and it's simple to play. So not upset with this decision at all. What's interesting is that queen takes f3 is actually inaccurate. The engine wants to play g takes f3, opening up this g file for white's rook, solidifying the center. These doubled pawns are not weak, according to the engine. So, interesting thought there. I also would have taken with the queen to speed up development. Here I played bishop c5, developing a piece, getting closer to castling. And I was a little bit worried about what happens after queen g3, but the answer is black just castles, and then if white takes, really cool little combination here. Bishop takes f2, and if the king takes, then we win the queen back. So a nice illustration that rapid development is always correct. The tactics work out in your favor if you're developing rapidly, controlling the center. Even if you can't see it at the beginning, the tactics are in your favor if you're playing according to chess principles. d3, I played h6, which I didn't like at the time. I was worried about bishop g5, hitting this knight twice, and doubling my kingside pawns, wrecking my kingside structure. I really thought that the structure was very loose for me there. The engine not buying it at all. Engine says c6, and then if white goes for that plan of bishop g5, you just act like nothing's happening, because nothing is happening. a5, the threat is b5, bishop retreats, a4, winning a piece, and so white needs to do something about that. if well, let's check this first. If bishop takes, queen takes, if these pawns are weak, and I'm not sure that they are, because maybe we can play d6 and f5 and maybe even f5 a second time after we've castled the bishop, and the rook would help us push that through. Queens are off the board now, so the king really has nothing to be afraid of, and so I had nothing to be afraid of and didn't need to play h6. So let's look at if white retreats first, then just d6, and again, if white goes for this plan, this threat is really just an illusion. Those doubled f pawns, it doesn't turn out, I guess, aren't weak, and once queens are off the board, then the open g file doesn't matter as much. But I play h6 to avoid all that. Bishop b3, which kind of seemed like a waste of time, although maybe the idea is to tie down the knight to the defense of the f7 square. I castled, which was a mistake. I didn't even consider what the engine says is the best response, which is g4. Now bishop b3 makes a lot of sense. White's bishops, where they are perfectly placed for a kingside attack. The knight can jump into d5 at any point. Queen's aggressively placed. The rook can come to the g file, or the queen can come to the g file. This is a big attack. This is very scary. What I should have done instead of castling was just play d6, stay a little flexible. Let white commit to castling before I do, so I could play queen e7, bishop e6, moves like that, and not give away my king's location so early. But I castled, and fortunately my opponent just castled as well. So dodged a bullet there. Now it's just a very normal game. I work hard to try to get caught up in development, but I'm feeling safe now. Now that I've disallowed the pin, got my king castled, I'm feeling pretty good in this position. White plays h3 to deny bishop g4, which would have developed with tempo. I played c6, keeping the knight out of d5 because I want to play queen e7 and bishop e6, opposing this light squared bishop, and didn't want queen e7 to run into knight d5. So I played c6 first to keep the knight out. He played bishop e3, and I chose to back up to b6 with the idea that if he ever takes, then what I would have done was recaptured with the a-pawn and enjoyed this nice semi-open a-file. Again, these pawns are not weak. Gives us nice extra central control. Maybe we expand with them later. So that's what I was hoping for. What happened though was queen g3. And here I decided to take, and going back to b6 and then to e3 is not ideal, but neither is queen g3 once this bishop is off the board. Note also that white may have ideas of taking this pawn that's pinned to the king. Now the timing of that has to be right because knight h5 might defend, and I didn't consider that in the game. Let's just look real quick if black just passes here. Yeah, the tactic does work. Knight h5 doesn't save it. Wow, because of queen g6. What a move. Now that bishop is really shining. This pawn's pinned. Okay, so I'm glad I didn't try to rely on defending the king with tactical tricks. I'm glad I just took on e3. Black recaptured f-pawn, which does make some sense. It opens up the rook. But I just played queen e7. Rook h4 is a move I don't understand. I thought keeping this pawn pinned so that, in effect, black is down a defender on the f6 knight would have been better. But queen h4, bishop e6, catching up in development, neutralizing his bishop, and now I'm feeling pretty good. Black starts to double on the f-file. I bring my rook over to defend my queen because I have this idea of alleviating all the tension in the position by swapping off his aggressively placed queen. I've got a little bit less space, my pieces are cramped. White has some pressure along the f-file, some trades are welcome here to reduce that tension. White takes and plays d4. And I immediately recognized that this was a mistake because I've got some potential attackers on the e4 pawn and just had to figure out what the best order of moves was. So, took a minute here and figured it out, and the way to exploit this move, I played the right move. So first, knight g5, hitting the rook, making the rook leave the defense or not easily be able to get on the e-file. So for example, if white or black had started with e takes d4, then after pawn takes, and if I try to do this immediately, then the rook can slide over, and this is still fine but not winning. So the right order of moves was knight g5 to get the rook on a bad square, take the bishop, forcing the recapture, now taking the d4 pawn, hitting the knight, forcing the recapture, and now I've got two attackers on e4, and took the pawn, and have a pretty easily winning endgame. So after d4, this is where, just grinding tactics all the time, this is where that pops up. After d4, it could be easy to panic. It looks like white has a ton of central presence, doubled rooks placed aggressively, knight and bishop are on pretty good squares. It's easy to panic here, but if you're grinding tactics, you immediately recognize that e4 pawn is now loose. And how do we exploit that? And so if you're thinking about, okay, what are the downsides of d4? How do I exploit that e4 pawn? Then you can eventually find the right sequence of moves. And so here took the pawn, and then was pretty happy with the conversion. Converting pawn up, or piece up for that matter, in games is not really my strength. That's something I want to get better at. But here it went very well. I was pretty happy with this. So just d5, reinforcing the knight, and now up a pawn. My win condition is pretty simple. Just trade off all the pieces and win with these three against these two, create a pass pawn, win the game. So I'm happy to trade pieces, and white was 2 there. White attacks the pawn, but just f5, and now I play rook e8 because someday when I get f4 in, I need to have the e4 pawn covered, because right now the rook's attacking it, and so rook e8 prepares the future advance of the pawn to f4. King e3 and g5, not allowing the king in. g3, really trying to stop my f4 move. Time to centralize the king. I defend the pawn when it's attacked, and king f6, defending that pawn when it's attacked. White plays rook h4, which doesn't really do much. And so now, interesting moment, how do you get the move f4 in? I played h5, h4. Now white is pretty much forced to take. He did, and now the pawn gets through, and that gave me time to recapture. Got 2 connected passers. The rest is easily winning. Took the only open file, protected the pawn, and here in a hopeless position, really, white lashed out and left with a horrible weakness on the d file, which I was going to scoop up easily, and here white resigned. So hope you enjoyed the game. Keep grinding those tactics. Thanks for watching.